I have been getting a lot of questions recently about my editing process, and today I wanted to give you an inside look on exactly how I edit my photos in Lightroom Classic. I'm not going to be going through my culling process or how I shoot, but I will be giving some tips along the way. For a lot of these photos, I'm going to start them off with presets, but we'll also go through and edit a couple from the ground up so you can see my entire start to finish process as well, so make sure you stick around for that. The way I like to start a lot of my photo editing is picking out a preset that either I've made or somebody else has made, just to get a feel for like what kind of colors I can go for, what kind of vibe I can go for, and sometimes the preset ends up working out pretty nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and try this cool one first. As you can see, it's a little bit dark, so we're gonna go ahead and take that exposure and bring it up just a little bit so we can see everything. I do still want it to be a little bit dark since it was taken at night. We'll bring up the shadows just a little bit so we can get some of those details back. Maybe the clarity up just a smidge. The last thing I'm going to do is add just a little bit of warmth right here. And this is what we get. Looks pretty solid to me. Let's move on to the next picture. I love this picture. These were just a couple strangers that we met. I saw them taking pictures, so of course I had to get a picture of them too. I'm going to start going through some of my presets here and see if I like any of the colors on them. You can see, since it's a cinematic pack, a lot of the colors are not going to be perfect for all of them, but this one, for example, looks pretty nice as a starting point. I like a lot of the greens and yellows in this one. The only things that we really need to fix is the exposure as well as the skin tones, just to make them a little bit nicer for this specific image. So I'm going to mess with the exposure just a little bit because I want this to be kind of an airy, bright type of edit while still feeling kind of moody. I'm going to turn the clarity up just a little bit on this because I really like the way this dude's hair is. I think with a little bit of clarity that looks pretty nice. We'll turn the vibrance down just a smidge. And then I'm going to go to the oranges because that's where the skin tones usually fall. And you can see it's a little bit on the red side for this preset. So I'm going to move it over just a little tiny bit. Move the luminance up a little bit. And then we'll fix the saturation. And that's about good. Maybe we could add just a little bit of orange back into the mid-tones here. There we go. I really like the way this one looks. One thing I do on a lot of my trips is I'll set my camera settings up and I'll hand it to a stranger, somebody I'm traveling with, so they can get a picture of me too. Same thing with this one. We're gonna go through and just look at some of the presets. I really like the way this lush one looks. The colors aren't too in your face. There's some things that we need to fix up just a little bit. For example, we'll turn the temperature up slightly. Exposure down just a little bit so we can kind of nail the skin tones. Turn the clarity up. I have it pretty low on this one because a lot of times I'll be using it for things like landscapes. But obviously this isn't just a landscape. It's got my beautiful face in it. We're going to fix up the skin tones just a little bit. Move the hue over a little bit more towards the red side. And look at that. Boom. My cheeks are red as hell because it was cold. And I live in Florida right now and I am not used to that cold. I love this picture. This was somebody's random dog that we found. And I walked up to them. We made a TikTok on it and everything. I was like, "Can I take a picture of your dog?" He said yes. So I took a picture of his dog. This one, we're going to edit from the ground up. Just because it's a really unique picture, I like it a lot. So when I first start a picture from scratch, I always mess with the blacks and the whites before anything else, as long as the exposure is pretty solid. So the exposure is good in this. I'm going to mess with the blacks and the whites just to see like a starting level of contrast that's going to be good. I don't want it to be too washed out and have too much of a filmic look, but I also don't want it to be like way too dark. So now that we have the whites and the blacks, I'll mess with the highlights a little bit just to see where we can have the most detail, because a lot of times if you have the highlights too far up, it just takes that detail out, especially if you shoot at a normal exposure, kind of like what I did with these. Technically, you're supposed to shoot a little bit underexposed, but we could still work with the picture, no problem. I'm going to turn the exposure down just a smidge, just to make it feel a little bit more moody. And then with the contrast, instead of bringing it up, I'm actually going to bring it down a little bit to save some of the details, and we'll bring some of the contrast back in the tone curve. Before we do that, I'm going to take just a little bit off the clarity here. down to like minus 10 to 12-ish. One thing that I do like to do is I'll turn the vibrance up, and then I'll turn the saturation just a little bit down. I feel like it adds a nice tone to some of the colors. So we'll go like that. Then already you can see it's looking pretty nice and moody. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the tone curve. I always like to bring this part up just a little bit on the bottom left corner so that the blacks aren't all the way black. You want to save some of the details in it. And then we'll just make a simple little S curve, figuring out exactly where we want the shadows to be a little bit darker so we can kind of control our contrast rather than just using a contrast slider. And then we'll move this up just a little bit. And then really important, I like to move this down at the top right corner just a little bit so the whites aren't true white. When you edit your photos, whether or not you're going for a filmic look, it's important to take a little bit out of the bottom left and a little bit out of the top right on the tone curve, just to preserve the most amount of details and so you don't have a true black and true white. That's just one of those things that's going to make your photos, designs, or whatever else graphic related just a little bit nicer. We are at a really good point with this picture already. This is the before, this is the after. It's looking really nice. I'm going to bring this up just a smidge more without it looking too crazy. And now we can go ahead and move on to the HSL. Whenever you have a lot of greenery or grass or trees or whatever, you can expect those to be in the green or the yellows. I like to start with that just to see how green or not I want it to be. We're actually going to go just a little bit more towards the green side. So on the greens, we'll mess with those a little bit too, tone them down just a little bit. Sometimes I like to match up the greens and the yellows so they're pretty similar, and sometimes I like to have a lot of contrast between them depending on what everything looks like. But for this one, I think just like this is going to be great. So it's very slight, but it makes the picture feel a little bit different. We'll go ahead and mess with some of the saturation on it as well. You can see the green one isn't doing too much unless you bring it pretty far down or pretty far up. So this is one of those just minor details that you want to figure out where it should go. So I'm going to actually bring these up just a little bit so the greens are more noticeable. And then with the yellows, I think we're actually going to move them down slightly, because if we bring them too far up, I feel like the yellows are way too close to the orange and it just doesn't really fit nice. So we'll just bring it tiny bit down. You don't really need to do too much. The photo may not look too different just from what we did there, but trust me, in the end, it's going to feel like a whole new photo. Now we can start messing with some of the colors on the dog. If you can't tell where a color is, go ahead and click this little button here, and then you can move it around and you'll see on the right, it shows you where all the different colors are, or you can just click and hold, and then when you drag up or down, it's going to mess with all of the colors in that range. You can see it's moving the yellows just a little bit because there's a little bit of yellow in it. So we're going to drag this until we find a nice spot for it. I like right about here. It's kind of putting some more emphasis on the orange. Looks pretty nice. And then we could do the same thing with the saturation. Just move it up and down till we feel it's right. Sometimes I like to push things to the extreme and then tone them down, because then you can get a sense of like what that slider is actually capable of and figure out a good middle ground for where you want it to be. The luminance, I'm just going to change by hand here. Just going to bring it up slightly, not too much at all. That looks pretty good. I'm going to take the highlights down just a little bit because we could see on his snout there it's like really white. So if I bring down the highlights a little bit, it saves some more of that detail. This could be a really great stopping point for the picture, or we can go just a little bit above and beyond. And of course, we're going to go a little bit above and beyond because that's what we do around here. We could start by messing with some of the colors in the color grading. I feel like with this one, I want to add like a nice, slight, subtle blue tint to the shadows. You can see it's really not doing too much at all, but it's again one of those things that just adds to the overall vibe a little bit. And once you go through and do all of these little things, it starts to look really nice. We'll bring some yellows into the midsection, just a little bit. What I like to do is I like to drag this out just a smidge, and then I'll move this wheel around to see what colors I feel like fit nice. And sometimes it just gives you a good idea of like where in the yellows to put it. If you drag it like way back here, you can kind of slowly start going back to the yellows and just see what feels right. Again, very subtle, but very effective. The highlights, I don't think we're going to do anything to, but I am just going to move them around here just to see what it does change. Sometimes you go a little bit more extreme if needed, but I just don't think we really need anything in the highlights right now. We'll blend just a little bit, mess with the balance to see if we can get a nice middle ground for that as well. We'll leave it right about here, and there you go. That's the colors. Very simple, very easy. Personally, I like to have the lens corrections on. Vignetting, I'm just not a fan of. Every once in a while, there's a picture that could use a nice vignette, but I would say 95% of my photos, I'm not really using a vignette. I would rather use masks in certain situations. So we're not going to add any to this one. Grain is also one of those things that's kind of to taste, right? Some people really like grain. Some people are very against it. Me personally, I like grain. I don't go too crazy with it, but just a little bit of grain can make the picture really soft and nice. I'm not going to mess with the size or the roughness. We'll change the amount to about 25. I try to stick to either like 25 or 50. It just adds like a nice little texture to it. It's barely noticeable. I think it looks great, especially when you put it on Instagram or anything that has like a smaller screen. And then last thing we are going to do on this picture is move on to the calibration. Calibration is a really awesome feature that is oftentimes looked over, and it can really change the whole feel of your picture. For the calibration, I don't really have a method specifically. I kind of use it last. I know some people like to use it when they're doing the temperature, but for me, I just like using it as kind of a final touch. Without any real method, I just kind of go around and I see what feels right. And that's honestly what a lot of photography is just seeing what feels right. If you want a pro tip to getting better edits, literally just get a bunch of RAWs, download them online or whatever, put some music on, and just start editing. And if you just sit there messing with the sliders, eventually you're going to figure out what works for you. But it's good to have a balance of watching tutorials like this, as well as actually sitting there and trying it yourself. Alright, and we have one final thing that we're going to do to this picture that I really love doing in any kind of pictures that have a lot of flowers like this. We're going to go ahead and head over to the masks. We're going to make a color range mask. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the flower. And you can see when I click on the flower, it covers almost all of them. So sometimes you have to drag just a little bit, but you also don't want to select everything. Alright, so we got a really nice selection here. Sometimes it's going to take a couple tries. But you can see I'll toggle the overlay on and off, and you can see that all the flowers are highlighted. We can change the saturation on it, and we can change the hue a little bit, make them pop just a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and bring the saturation up, and then we'll turn the temperature up like that. Boom. And again, very subtle change, but it looks pretty nice. If you want to go crazy with it, you can go and you could change the hue, change the amount slider so it's not too much or whatever, and kind of go through and edit the color of all the specific flowers. We're not going to do that in this video, but it is possible, so give it a try sometime. That being said, this photo is done. Let's move on to the next one. This is a really cool shipwreck that we saw. I am going to actually start this one out with a crop. Like that. That's pretty cool. This one was shot just a tad overexposed, but it's enough that we can get a bright, nice look to it still. So we'll go ahead and go through some of these different presets here. And I think, honestly, for this one, we're going to go with the cool preset. Cool is definitely my favorite preset of the pack. I called it cool because it's really cool in a lot of situations. We'll turn down the exposure just a little bit, so we add a little bit more of that moody vibe. So this is the before and this is the after. And yeah, we literally don't have to do anything else to that picture. It just looks great like that. This picture was pretty cool. For this one, I think we're going to go with this muted tones preset. I really like this one when you kind of want to put a highlight on just like the people. I made it so a lot of the other things are already muted out. We're going to move the exposure down just a little bit. I definitely love this look a lot. It's just nice and clean. Go ahead and move on to the next one. I love this picture. This is a picture that my girl took of me. This one, cool preset. Boom. Profile picture. And I'm wearing the same shirt right now. That's crazy. I got a small wardrobe, bro. This one, really awesome landscape picture that we took while we're driving. Obviously you could see because of these marks. So before anything else, we're going to go ahead and go over to the eraser tool. I'm going to use the generative AI. You don't have to use the AI version of it if you don't want. I think just the normal eraser could be fine for it, but I like having the generative fill and AI stuff in Lightroom. I think it's pretty sick. I'm going to make sure I'm on the subtractive one, and then I'm going to hit apply. And that should just take that mark right out. Perfect. Look at that. It's like it's not even there. Like there's a tiny bit of a mark there, but once we do everything to it, you're not even gonna notice it. All right, so one thing about this preset pack is it's got a couple weird presets in it. This one, Armageddon, only has a few specific purposes. It's hard to find a picture that really works for this, but I think this one's kind of nice. We can just warm it up a little bit. We could cool it down. I like it just a little warm. For this picture, I'm not going to use this preset, but this is one where it could work, but this one's very specific, so don't be alarmed if it doesn't work for a lot of your pictures. The other one that I wanted to note was Memoria. This one's really sick, and it's probably going to be the one that we use for this picture, honestly. This one is going to start out super orange, like really, really orange. Don't be alarmed. Don't clown me. It's not a bad preset. All you got to do is know how to use it right. We're going to take this temperature slider and just go down. And look at that. Oh my God. We're going to mess with the exposure just a little bit. We'll go ahead and crop in just a little bit too, because we have this little thing here that I don't want in the picture. But this preset is perfect for making a nostalgic vibe. There's a lot of different situations where this one can look really nice. You just have to, like I said, know how to use it right. So we're going to just slide the temperature down, and that's it. Next, this picture is sick. I love it. This is at Multnomah Falls in Oregon. Very beautiful place. We're going to go ahead and start with a crop before we do anything else to it. And I bet you can't guess what preset we're going to use on this. We're going to use the cool preset. We're also going to use this dreamy glow effects. So this is a bonus preset that comes in my pack. You could literally sit here and copy the settings if you want. It's also on my site for 10 bucks, or you could use the code YouTube at checkout and get 20% off. So literally get all of these for like 8 bucks, or just sit here and copy them all. Don't care. This mask makes everything a little bit glowy. I did like a luminance range. Overall, we're going to take down the exposure just a little bit, and we're going to warm it up just a tiny bit. Like that, like literally +7, not that much at all. And then we're gonna add a couple masks. So first I'm gonna do a linear gradient all the way up to there. I'm gonna turn the exposure down just a little bit on that. That's really nice. I'm gonna take a radial gradient because you can see the sun's kind of coming in over here, but I just want to go whoop, like that. Warm that up just a little bit. Turn the exposure up just a little bit, and boom, look at this. You have a beautiful picture. This is the original. This is the edited. You can see the mask. Maybe the mask is just a little bit too far up. We'll move it down slightly, like there. Look at that. That's so nice. That's so crazy. I love this picture. And the dreamy glow. This is my boy Iverson. We got a cool picture in the same type of area. We're gonna slap that cool preset on there. Turn the exposure down just a little bit so it's very cool and cinematic. I could kind of see a vignette being used in this one. I don't know. I don't really like vignettes that much, but we'll use a little one like that. Maybe I'm just not mature as a photographer, but I just think vignettes are kind of old school and lame. But shout out to you if you use them and they look great. All right, this next one, I have a very specific preset in mind right off rip. It's the other bonus preset in this pack. It's called Black and White Expired Film, and it destroys the picture, first of all. So if you want a nice, clean, detailed, soft picture, whatever, this is not your preset. This one makes it look grungy and cool and, like the preset says, kind of like expired film. You can add even more of a filmic look to it by dragging this up and dragging this up. Look at the difference. I would say with this preset, composition is very important. If you don't have a cool composition, it's just not going to look as good. But yeah, moving on. One thing that I've been testing out recently is shooting a little bit warmer in camera. I went a little bit overboard with this one, but in the end, it ends up working out really nice. And the reason I wanted to do this is to keep the skin tones looking really great in any of my portrait shots. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this Warm Magic preset. And then I'm going to turn my temperature slider down just a little bit. And we can even use this little dropper as well to figure out exactly where the correct white balance should be. You just put it on something either gray, white, or black, but ideally gray. And then I'm going to move the temperature back up. And you can see we have some really freaking nice skin tones in here. We'll bring the clarity up just a little bit. And that's a great picture, just like that. It doesn't need anything else. Maybe just shadows up a smidge. This one, literally the same thing. When it is similar pictures like this, I'll literally go to this first one, hit Control C, keep all the important things that I need, and then boom, Control V, and look at that. Super easy. So that way I can just go through and edit a bunch of pictures really quick instead of doing every single one from scratch. Here's another one we can do that same thing with. We'll Control V it. You can see it's a little bit of a different situation. So we'll take a little bit of that warmth back out. Add a little tiny bit of exposure. Take down the highlights. Take the whites down just a little bit. We'll keep a little bit of highlight in there because it is supposed to be a little bit glowy and bright. Make sure that the shadows are up enough to give us some detail, but not so far up that the image looks flat. Same thing with the blacks. Exposure up just a smidge. And then the only thing I want to do with this one is just take a little bit of saturation out of the oranges just because they are a pretty orange and we don't want them to look like Oompa Loompas. That picture looks great. Look at that. I would post that on Instagram. I did post that on Instagram. This one is one of my favorite pictures that I took while I was in Oregon, actually. Let's mess with some presets on this one again, see what we can find. I really like this Oregon preset on this. I wouldn't really do anything to this. Yeah, we could mess with the exposure and stuff a little bit, but I don't know, maybe just bring down the whites a little bit. Bring up the shadows smidge. Like if we really wanted to get technical with it. Boom. Picture is done. Before, after. Beautiful. This picture is sick. This is actually in the same area. It's just a little bit to the left of where that cliff was. We're going to start it off with a crop, of course, because this one is pretty crooked. And I'm not really a fan of the crooked pictures. And we got so many options with this picture. We go with the Cinegreens, which add some nice greens. We do the classic cool for a nice rustic look. Downtown. Ugh, it's all beautiful. But I think with this one, we're going to go with the Oregon preset right here. And I mean, look at that. I'm literally going to do nothing else to that picture. It is perfect like that. All right, and this is the last picture that I'm going to show you guys. There's nothing too special about this picture, but it is just about the perfect exposure and lighting situation. So I just wanted to show you guys how easy it is to slap a preset on and call it a day with the perfectly shot picture like this. I also did use a glow filter for some of these, by the way. Boom. Literally just like that. Turn the exposure down if we wanted to. But like really, you don't need to do anything else for this picture. It just looks great like that. Alright, so that is my photo editing process. Feel free to go through the video and copy the settings from the presets that I showed you guys. Also, it's available on my website for 10 bucks. If you use the code YouTube at checkout, you can get 20% off. So it's literally like 19 presets for 8 bucks. If you've got anything else you want me to cover or you feel like I missed something, feel free to leave a comment and I'll see if I can help you out. Other than that, have a great rest of your day and good luck with your future edits.